Hello, my name is Sue Piggott and I work for Talkback, and a very warm welcome to our Learning Disability Insights webinar. Just to give you a little bit of background about Talkback, we are a small charity based in Buckinghamshire, but we work wherever we need to work really, especially when it comes to training. We provide a range of services across education, supported employment, as well as valued activities, hobbies and personal development for people with learning disabilities, but also autistic people. We've been around for some 24 years now, and I'm glad to say that we are always developing and always branching out into other areas. So let's get on with our package of training today. I am going to rely on you to be a little bit honest because there are a few quizzes, but I'm sure you will. I'm sure I'm with good people here. So let's have a look at what we'll be looking at today. So we're going to do just a small quiz really, just to check your understanding of learning disability. We're going to look at definitions, causes, some models of disability, a little bit on the history of learning disability, some types of learning disabilities that have actually got, that are actually diagnosable and have recognised names, if you like. We'll also have a look at some of the coexisting conditions that many people with learning disabilities have on top of their learning disability. And then most importantly, we're going to take a look at some of the supportive approaches that you can use to help the people that you're maybe looking after or caring for, whether it be in a medicinal capacity or palliative or whatever capacity you are sort of caring for people. And then there'll be a final little quiz, which again, I'm hoping you'll be honest with, just again to see what your learning is from this training. So let's go to the next slide and start the quiz. So I quite like statistics. Every now and then it kind of, makes me smile a bit, statistics. And so I thought I'd ask the question about your knowledge as to how many people are there in the UK who have a learning disability. Do you think it's 100,000 people? Is it 1.5 million? Or is it 500,000 people? And I'll give you a few moments just to kind of think about what your answer would be. Obviously, we can't do it live because this is a recording. So what do you think? And the answer is 1.5 million. Now, that says 1.5 million, but that's only those people who actually have been assessed and in a way registered with their either local authority or within their local health authority. There are probably a lot of people out there who have, for want of another expression, slipped under the net and have a learning disability but have not had this recognised. So although there's 1.5 million people out there, I think from the older generation there could well be more than that. And we just need to bear that in mind when anyone comes into our care. We just need to maybe think about, am I working with someone who has perhaps a learning disability? So let's go to the next quiz question. So how many people with learning disabilities still live in long stay hospitals? Is it less than 1,000? More than 2,000? What do we think? And the answer is it's over 2,000. It's 2,040. Now, long stay hospitals have had a very, very bad press. over the years, simply because they just did not provide any individuality for a person. But unfortunately, they do have a role to play, because many people, particularly who have perhaps autism on top of their learning disability, may find it very difficult to find community-based care or support that will enable them to live in the local community. It's very sad to think that, local authorities and, charities like Talkback perhaps struggle to find funding to actually help people, but that is how it is. Many people, well, I say it's 355 have been in hospital for probably more than 10 years. And so therein lies yet another issue. You just can't move someone out of hospital and put them in the community. So there's a certain amount of work that would be needed from both, the person concerned as well as us, people who are caring, to actually, make that happen and to make it successful. So it's a very, very tricky piece of work, that, very tricky. I haven't got any solutions, by the way. I wish I had, but yeah, it's very, very difficult, and probably difficult for the families to cope with as well. So another question, this came out really as a result just before the pandemic, actually, this question, but it was, how much time do young people with learning disabilities spend outside on a typical Saturday? What do we think? And the answer is, research suggests that 1 in 3 young people with a learning disability spend less than an hour outside their home on a typical Saturday. Now, I would argue that that goes for some of our, all young people, because there's this real high leaning now, isn't there, to social media and mobile phones and online and gaming and all the rest of it. So I don't know whether it's just restricted to people with learning disabilities now, but when MenCat did this study, it was around that, and they discovered that, many people on a Saturday just didn't really go anywhere. And so that needs to be addressed really at some point. So here's the next question then, and this is around paid work. Many people with learning disabilities want to work like the rest of us, really. They want to earn a living and be around their local communities offering their services. So how many people do we think with learning disabilities are in paid work? Is it more than 500, more than 100,000, or less than 8,000? What do we think? And the answer is, it's less than 8,000. Unfortunately, it's fallen due to the pandemic, unfortunately. It was at 6%, but it's now dropped to 5.1. But that was 2 years ago, so I probably do need to update my data there. And again, this is only those people that are known to their local authority. So those quiz questions just give you a little bit of an insight into people with learning disabilities and the things in a way that challenge them as much as the rest of us. So let's come on now to the definition of learning disability. So this is our own definition. We decided to make our own one really at Talkback. And so what we've said is that a learning disability affects an individual's capacity to learn certain life skills throughout their life. And the important sentence there is, it's throughout their life. There are ways to support people, But if you take that support away, people are going to struggle or find life quite challenging. The challenges for people with learning disabilities, they experience them vary from person to person. There's no one particular way of looking at learning disability. And we often say if you've met one person with learning disabilities, then you've met one person with learning disabilities. You can't, collectively put everybody together. Some of these disabilities can include sort of understanding information. It might be how they communicate with other people. Some people with learning disabilities have restricted vocabulary, but that's not to say they can't learn new vocabulary, but you just need to explain it perhaps. And then learning and maintaining life skills. We all take for granted the things that we have to do on a daily basis. And for some people with learning disabilities, that has to be learnt quite manually over and over again. Making positive relationships. This is a huge area for many people with learning disabilities. And this is where perhaps their vulnerability gets exploited by others, which is, pretty awful really. I've seen some horrible situations crop out because people haven't just recognised that they're being taken advantage of. Understanding personal safety, the things that you again take for granted, being sort of aware of your own sort of safety and your own surroundings and the environment. Managing money, I think we can all put our hands up to that one really, can't we, on a general note. But I think for many people with learning disabilities, understanding how money works is quite difficult at times, and they will need some support. Reading and writing, that's not to say people with learning disabilities can't read or write. I know some people that are extremely proficient at that, but again, it's just some people will struggle with it, so just to be aware of that. And then carrying out those sort of personal care activities, it may well be that they just need reminding or understand why they're having to do certain things. And to be encouraged to keep themselves clean. So for many people, they will need help with some of it. For others, they'll need help with all of it. Other people won't need any help at all. Again, it's very much experienced it varies from person to person. So what causes learning disabilities? Well, here's our lovely little chap here who has a learning disability, and you can tell him straight away really, can't you, because he's got that look of a classic Down syndrome baby. Absolutely beautiful though, absolutely love him. I love the way he's clasping his hands, he's wonderful. So what causes learning disabilities? Well, sometimes it is genetics, sometimes it can be inherited genes. Sometimes it can be perhaps damage to the baby's brain and spinal cord, whether that's happened inside or outside of the womb. There may well be an illness experienced by the mother during her pregnancy, so that may sort of have a negative effect on the baby's development again. Unfortunately, fetal alcohol syndrome. This is where the mother unfortunately doesn't stop drinking or drinks quite heavily when they're pregnant, and so this can affect the baby's brain and spinal cord development again within the womb. It may well be that the child has an illness again that perhaps affects the brain, or it may well be that they've had an accident, and again the accident is focused around the brain or the spinal cord that's causing all the problems, or that can cause the challenges for people. Sometimes it can be around the premature birth because the brain hasn't had the opportunity to fully mature. Or it may be that the baby doesn't get enough oxygen during the actual birth. But what we're saying here is that all of these causes are caused by the way the brain develops before, shortly or after birth. Unless, of course, it's an acquired injury, we won't always know. What we mean by acquired injury is perhaps someone has a really nasty fall or accident or an illness that actually then causes, in a way, an impairment in the brain. But we won't always know. Sometimes learning disability doesn't kind of come to the fore until the the person is grown. So there are many sort of different models of disability out there, but the medical model one, for me, offers us a bit of an insight into how society has perhaps treated people over the years. And we still do this a little bit, unfortunately, even now. So medical model thinking is that the disabled person or the person with a disability has nothing to bring to society. They have a bad image. You will often get pictures of people looking, not particularly, beautiful photos that have been taken at someone's worst time. They have no qualifications, but even worse, they don't even have the opportunity to do those qualifications, to actually apply for them or to actually try them. People with disabilities are expensive because they require extra support in order to carry out the things that they want to do on a daily basis. And unfortunately, people, local authorities are, strapped for cash, and so it's quite an expensive adventure. They're often looked at as victims rather than just people in their own right. And often what you will find is, because of that, the person themselves sees themselves as a victim, which we really don't want that to happen. We want people to feel that they are a very valued member of their local community. The person will probably, and us, will only just look at the person and just only know about their disability. We won't know about any of their special skills. A lot of people, particularly with autism, have incredible skills, but the same can be said with people with learning disabilities. I've worked with someone who can do the calendar. He can tell you exactly when you were born, in what year, what day of the week. It's incredible. So rather than looking at just what the person can't do the whole time, a lot of people will only focus on the disability. And can you believe it? All of that will bring on difficult behaviour. I'm not surprised, are you? If that's how you're thinking about a person, then you are going to have difficult behaviour. So that's the medical model. But here at Talkback, we prefer the social model, which is much better. So we've got better designed buildings to help people get in. General health care is recognised not part of disability, so you get this diagnostic overshadowing where, people have got sort of physical conditions and they're being told that it's because of their learning disability. No, it isn't. There's no discrimination. People are entitled to receive the services that they are entitled to. And it's this one-size-fits-all attitude. We are all unique. Hello, welcome to our world. It really is that we are all different. Alternative formats of communication are made available, and information. There are ramps, not stairs. Reasonable adjustments for employment and health services. We talk about this a lot at Talkback. Making those little changes that will just help someone with their employment, or getting an appointment, or being able to sort of operate in the big wide world. Accessible transport, making sure you can get to wherever it is you want to get to, and wherever appropriate, access to mainstream schools, so that you've got that socialisation, so that you've got that inclusivity about it. So that doesn't necessarily cover learning disability, it just covers disability as a whole, really. But it's a good way of thinking about how we view people with learning disabilities, rather than perhaps the medical model, which focuses totally on just the impairment. So here the environment is adapted to each situation. Okay, so let's move on now to the history. Now, normally I would put on a wonderful video of a lady called Mabel, but unfortunately it's too long to include on this little webinar. But the history of people with learning disabilities is a real topic that is very close to my heart. So for many people back in, the late 16th, 17th century, we were still living at home, and it was very much, rural farmland where they could do the odd jobs. They were still known as the village idiots, unfortunately, and they were appallingly treated, probably. But at least they were still living within their family units, and they were able to sort of function to a certain degree. With the onset of the Industrial Revolution, things changed, and unfortunately people with learning disabilities were left pretty much unsupervised all day long. And society's answer to this was, well, we've got to get these people off the street because they're just begging, alongside other people who perhaps struggled with their mental health at that time. So the local authorities built asylums, and there were many of them throughout the whole of England. They are actually grade listed buildings now, most of them, and some of them that have closed have now become luxury flats, which is rather ironic when you think about the way that people were treated inside some of these hospitals. The expression there, Bedlam, comes from one of the first asylums that was ever built, and it was called Bethlehem, and it was out East Croydon. It's still there actually, but it's not, it's not an asylum now. But people used to peer through the window, and they just used to see chaos inside, with people just going berserk, really. And so rather than calling it Bethlehem, they called it Bedlam, and that's where the expression Bedlam comes from. Many people struggled in these asylums. It was just awful. There was no value, there was no choice, there was no control. You were just dressed. I mean, you were living in a, top to tail bed situation. It was pretty awful. And in fact, it's only in recent times that these hospitals have actually been closed. Certainly within my time, they've only just closed. And I was unfortunate to work in one for a short time, very short time, I might add. And it was pretty horrendous. It was all dormitories with, beds. It was just horrible. But gradually people started moving out into the community, and I'm glad to say that most of these have now sort of closed. But obviously we still have people living in similar sort of assessment and treatment units, really, because, as I said at the beginning of this webinar, about the lack of support in the community for those people who do have some very, very challenging behaviours. And it's very, very difficult to find people, organisations to run that level of support. So that's the history. I always include it because, as I say, I'm a frustrated historian, really, at the end of the day. So here are a few recognised sort of learning disabilities. You will probably recognise some, maybe. They're all actual specific learning disabilities, and they offer, they can all be assessed for individually. Obviously the famous one is Down syndrome, but the others I've highlighted in bold, Fragile X and Williams, are the ones that I've come across quite a few times, and I've worked with many people with those conditions as well. Although, to be honest, I've worked with most people within those categories. So Down syndrome, as we know, is a genetic disorder which results in an extra partial copy, well, either an extra full or partial copy of chromosome 21. And it's interesting because you can, have a test to see if you are carrying a Down syndrome baby. But there are still, 1,000 babies being born in the UK, and there are some 40,000 in the UK with that condition. Most have extremely proficient and enjoyable lives. So, Fragile X is the inherited cause of learning disability, which is why it's so remarkable. And it's often associated with men, and this is because men only have the one X chromosome, and that's the one that is normally impaired, which is why it's called Fragile X. Some females appear unaffected, but others may present with just mild learning disabilities. And again, it's back to that, if you've met one person, you've met one person with Fragile X. Everything is experienced differently. And then Williams is another genetic condition, a very distinctive look from a person that has Williams syndrome. And again, it affects 1 in 18,000 people. There are some links there, so if you want any more sort of information, do go on to the links. And then just to quickly go through some of the other coexisting conditions, you will often find many people with learning disabilities will have the odd hearing or vision sort of challenge. Many people with Down syndrome have glue ear, which renders them a little bit deaf sometimes. So you will often find that many people have other conditions on top of their learning disability. The social context of the person as well can play a big part on whether the person is developing at a steady rate and being able to do more for themselves, or I worked with a gentleman who was in an Asian community, and they weren't keen on the rest of their local, sort of friends and family to know that they'd got someone with a learning disability, so they hid him away. And of course that in a way exacerbated his learning disability, because he wasn't socialising, he wasn't getting out, he wasn't doing anything. So that social context of the person will play a big part on the success of a person's development. There may be some speech and language development. It might be a bit slower than normal, but that's not to say it can't be built upon. There's behaviour. Sometimes you will often find, because people can't communicate or they can't hear, or because their social context is low, that you often get some behaviour issues. All behaviour is communication, so find out what the problem is. Find out what the problem is, and then you can help the behaviour. The behaviour will sort itself out. Some people may have other health conditions, hole in the heart, sort of other sort of circulatory problems or what have you. But again, it's got nothing to do with the learning disability per se, but we just need to make sure that those conditions are being treated separately, but they are taken into consideration. Physical development, not everybody will grow in the same way. Particularly people with Down syndrome tend to be quite sort of small in height, or they may have hip and arthritic joints at times, or they may have extremely robust joints. Again, you can't say it's across the board. Everyone is different. And social and emotional development is a huge one, isn't it? Because again, it's about ensuring that the person understands, that how we connect with one another, how we communicate, what we say, what we don't say, all those things that a lot of the time we all take for granted, really. And understanding emotions, that can cause real problems for some people, because they won't necessarily recognise them. So we're coming on to the best bit now, which is what you can do to support people. And I love this quote, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. Good old Margaret Mead, she was such an advocate for kind of, getting things right for people. And it really is those simple things that we can do that really will make such a difference to the people that we're working with or caring for or supporting. So, if someone's talking to you, try not to interrupt them. Let them say what it is they want to say. Find a hobby or an interest that you can use to support people to understand more complex things. It's so interesting, isn't it? Just to spend a bit of time getting to know the person that you're caring for and using their hobbies and interests to help explain things to them, perhaps. Use language that the person uses. Acronyms, metaphors, similes, we all use them as part of our everyday language, but for some people, you're going to leave them very confused. Pull your socks up. It's raining cats and dogs. You're driving me up the wall. They're all things that really have no real sense to them. So use the language that the person uses if you're trying to explain or have a conversation with that person. Break activities down so that people can focus on one aspect at a time. Overloading someone with too much information can have a detrimental effect, So break it down. And listen, but not just to necessarily reply to them. It's really interesting, isn't it? Listen, don't interrupt. Listen, but not just to reply. Just listen to what people are saying. It's really important. Do be prepared to repeat or what you've said or asked. You don't have to do it, like what's up, what's up, what's up. Goodness sake. But it is about, do you understand what I've just said to you? Shall I say it again? Are you okay? Those sorts of questions, just to help the person make sure they've understood what they've got to do or what they need to do to help themselves ultimately. Make adjustments so that people can be included and participate. So again, if you're sort of running a sort of a day service or something, you might want to just, make sure that everyone can take part in the things that you're doing, so that, they feel very much a part of the setup. Give people time to process. We're all in a hurry, aren't we? Can you, I don't know, I can't think of a question now, but, it's just giving people that time to process what you've asked them. Can you take your medication now? Let them process that question before you then ask it again, and maybe ask it perhaps in another way. Don't rush. Oh, crikey. Yeah, here we go. I know it's hard, isn't it? You've got, 25 things to do before 10 o'clock and someone's taking their time. But, you really aren't going to make the situation any easier if you're rushing the person. Keep choices, so that it's about the person themselves, really. and make sure that they have got those choices to make. And when asking questions, keep to one topic at a time. We often say lose the word and. We use the word and, don't we, too much, I think, really. So, you know, it's, can you get out of bed and wash your face? You know, well, let's just stick with, can you get out of bed? You know, can you get up? So I hope those questions really, hope those things, support approaches, will be sort of helpful to you. They're only small, but they make such a difference to the person that you're caring for. So here's our final quiz. So I'm hoping you'll be honest here. So which characteristic of a learning disability is correct? Is it learning disabilities are lifelong, learning disabilities only occur in childhood, or there really is only one type of learning disability? And I really hope you chose A, that learning disabilities are lifelong. So well done if you got that right. What is a possible cause of learning disability? Child is not interested in study, bad parenting, or is it a bit more genetics? And the answer is, of course, genetics. Yeah, it's got nothing to do with the rest of it. So the final question then, let's have a quick look. So when communicating with someone who has a learning disability, it's best to show by example, break activities down so that people can focus on one aspect at a time, or when asking questions, keep to one topic at a time and lose the word and. So which one do you think is good? Well, it's a trick question because all of the answers are correct. So you should say A, B and C. And just to say once again, listening to people when they're talking is so important. Can't emphasise that enough. So a final little slide. Again, it's up to you if you want to do that, but maybe have a think about doing something differently than what you've done before. Maybe something you can start doing when it comes to, you know, helping the people that you're caring for. And maybe something you'll stop doing. Maybe you'll stop rushing. Wouldn't that be wonderful? I know. You'll have to speak to your line managers, I'm sure. So that brings us to a close. So thank you all very much for listening to me today. I hope that was really helpful. Do get in touch with us and let us know what you thought. Or if you want any further information, do let me know by contacting us on the email addresses there. So I wish you all well, and take good care of yourselves and keep doing the most amazing job that you all do. Cheerio for now. Bye.